We're going to get the show on the road here. Call the open session to order. We need the approval of the minutes for October the 2nd, 2018.
So moved.
Seconder. Okay. Need the adoption of the agenda. Need a mover?
Move it.
Seconder.
Second.
Okay. Disclosure of conflict of interest. Anybody here is giving conflict of interest? 5, consent agenda. We don't have anything on the consent agenda. And delegations and presentations. Constable Grant Hines, Uptown Beat Patrol, and then I turn over to Chief.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight I'd like to introduce to the board and to the community here in open session Constable Grant Lyons. Grant's been with the St. John Police Force for 30 years. I had the privilege when I was a patrol officer to be Grant's coach officer. And so all the good things he learned from his coach officer. So when I came back in the organization in April, one of the things in my noontime walks around the Uptown area, I thought it would be a good thing both for the Uptown and for the organization to have a visible presence in the Uptown area. And then I'll have Grant talk about the area that he patrols. But so from that, Grant was reassigned and has taken over the Uptown area, and I'll call upon Grant to kind of come forward and give you a good overview of his duties.
Thank you. A little nervous, this is new to me, so.
Don't be nervous, we're all
Not
friends.
at all. We're looking forward to hearing from this.
You're the guy with the gun, we're nervous.
As Chief Connell said, I am the
Grant, please feel free to sit down.
Yeah,
Sure.
please be comfortable, absolutely.
This does not need to be formal.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So my present position is the Uptown Beat Officer. That would cover, the beat would cover from Camarson Street west to Water Street, down along where the cruise ships are. Union Street south to Duke Street. So it covers through Harbor Passage, King Square, Loyalist Burial Grounds, and everything in between. Throughout the week, I change my shifts around. I may start at 8, 9, or 10. I'm around in the evenings as well when people are getting off of work. There's King Street, Germain Street is a heavy travel area for pedestrian traffic. So there's been some good feedback in regards to those time frames. I also do a 1 to 9 to be later in the evenings. If there's a weekend event happening, I do my best to be around on the weekend as well. I'm flexible that way. So the feedback from it on the street is unbelievable support we have out there. Working in his own car for most of my career, I didn't see that, and it's nice to see the support that people give us. It really is. During my shifts, I encounter a lot of mental health issues out there. The panhandlers, the addictions, but I do take the time to talk to these people. With the mental health, I find that a lot of those people are just looking for someone to talk to. They're looking for a friend, and I'm their friend, and they'll come and talk to me, which is it seems to be making a difference. I'm very surprised at how much we engage into in conversation with people on the street. It may be just be a hello, it's a nice day, or it could be a 20-30 minute conversation about just about anything. People seem to really want to talk to us, and many will say, I wouldn't flag down a police car, but they will approach you on the street. We have a street survival booklet that I give out as well. I started with the panhandlers. That's one of our major complaints I find on the street, and people being intoxicated and being around the banks and stuff. So I've given out the booklets, I've given the warnings, and if I have to proceed from that point on with charges, I have. We've been successful in 4 or 5 people who have been major problems in the King Street area. there's been arrests made, and there's been conditions put on these people. And again, coming back from the public, they can see a difference, a big difference. When I first started out, there could be as many as 10 to 12 to 15 panhandlers in the area. From time to time, you see 3 or 4 around. So it's the presence of police, and I'm not tooting my own horn by no means, just having that presence has definitely improved that problem. I'm a tour guide as well. You give a lot of directions and instructions around, and especially with the new parking meters, the new parking stations. It's taken some time for people to get used to those, so it's been helpful for them to be out there and help them as well. There's been 28 files generated of various types of crimes and incidents on the street. Since I've been there's been 15 criminal arrests, 27 criminal charges. We've executed 5 committal warrants, 2 arrest warrants. Under our Provincial Procedures Act, which covers liquor control, cannabis control act, motor vehicle act, and city bylaw under the panhandlers, there's been 23 violations issued in those areas. Again, the biggest problems or complaints that I hear is panhandling, and the intoxicated people are we call them our regulars, I guess. Through the Loyalist Burial Grounds, we've gone from 10 to 12 that congregate in that area, now to 1 or 2 the odd time. They've issued violations in regards to Liquor Control Act, and it seemed to help that problem. But overall, it's I've done the job for nearly 30 years. When you're in the patrol car, you see a lot of negative, mostly all negative. But to have the opportunity to be out there on the street and walking, and now seeing that there is so much support out there, it's amazing. It really takes me back. It's overwhelming some days. And throughout the run of a day, 12 to 15 people will come up and shake your hand and thank you for what you do. So that goes right to the heart. So it's, I'd just like to thank Chief Connell, the management staff, as well as yourself, to have that opportunity to be out there doing this job. I'm close to the end of my career, and it's I take pride in my job, and as well as the city, and it's been great. And I thank you for that.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Just a comment and a question. So Grant, I live in your beat. I live right at Princess and Prince William. And I see you all the time, but you're far enough away that I'm running to a meeting. I can't wait to shake your hand, but I'm going to one of these days. But I would say, like, it's awesome seeing your presence uptown. And the chief told us about it, and then I started seeing you around, and you're always talking to someone. I notice it's you're the people you just described. I see you talking to them on a regular basis every time I see you.
It's out of the 8-hour shift. I mean, it's you're not out between 5 and 10 minutes, and you're engaged in a conversation.
Right.
And it's and as well as with the cruise ships and the tour buses through town, they are obviously from many different countries, and policing is obviously different, and they don't have that opportunity to have a conversation or meet a police officer. Right. And the photos are, I thought it was a movie star.
You doing autographs then? Charge $1.
There's a few that it was a highlight of their visit to St. John to have that opportunity, and it's great for us. I've met so many great people, and it's all been positive.
Well, it's really visible. Grant, one of the things I was going to ask you, if you'd like, so there's, when Sophie and I and our kids moved right uptown, we learned really quickly that there's this really cohesive neighborhood of people that live uptown.
Yes.
In that area, and we meet fairly regularly. Not officially, it's usually over a beverage at the end of the workday.
Sure.
If you guys would like, I'd love to have you come to that group, because it's sort of informally formal. It's the same
Sure.
group of 30 or 40, but different every time.
Okay.
And I'm sure they'd love to meet you and just learn about why you're doing what you're doing, what you're hearing. They might have some feedback for you.
I appreciate
so,
that.
If
Yes.
the chief will let you have a glass of wine, I guess you'd have to be off
Definitely
duty.
not to, yeah.
So maybe right at the end of your shift, we could coordinate an informal, formal, whatever.
Lock the gun up, then come back.
But I'm sure, I'm sure the gang would really love to meet you.
Sure.
And
If you like
meet
to-
them, I'm sure you email already, so.
If you'd like to just send me off an email, like
Awesome.
sometime,
I'll
that'd
do
be
that.
perfect.
Yeah, that'd
And
be great.
yes, thank you, that'd be great.
Perfect, thanks, Grant.
I have engaged with Uptown St. John, the City Market, Brunswick Square. I did a little presentation on fast food coming closer to Christmas and what to do and what not to do. So,
Okay.
and a lot of the business owners I've gotten to know, and not all. Try my best to meet everybody.
That's
And but from the start to date, it's really been a positive thing with the public out there. It's
great.
and like I say, they have this opportunity. For me at this point, it's heartfelt.
I have your email address in the back. Thanks, Grant.
Not a problem.
Thank you very much.
So now a couple of, sorry, go ahead.
Thanks for coming to meet with us.
Thank you.
How long have you been walking the beat uptown?
I started, I believe it was August 7th, and I had some vacation since then in between. So I kind of took the first few weeks I worked east a lot of my career in west, and I took the time to get familiar with how uptown operates and get to know who's who and who I may be dealing with on a regular basis. So pretty much since, I guess since around the 7th of August.
How far into the winter do you plan on walking?
I'll be there.
Excellent.
I'll be there. If the chief allows me, I'll be.
Big fur hat.
Snowshoes and a shovel, because I think
Yes.
you work part-time for the parking commission, so we should send them a bit of a bill. Do you ever get an opportunity, I work at one of the high schools, do you ever get an opportunity to interact with any of the high school kids when they're out and about?
I have. You know, from the amount of students that are uptown, the majority are really respectful. You do have the odd one that's, we say, beak off a little bit, but you can put them in their place pretty quick, and that eliminates the problem. They've been congregating behind Calvary Temple, as well as the parking lot behind the Royal Bank that leads to Germain. So during the lunch breaks, I'll
Wander through.
those areas, and
Perfect.
you can deal with groups of anywhere from 20 to 30, but you only have, and not all the time, just every so often you'll have one that has to say something to show off for the friends, but they know I'm around, and those areas where, like you say, they go, I'll be there.
Excellent. Thanks very much.
Oh, no problem at all.
Chairman, a couple, had the opportunity to speak to you, granted, on the street one day, and I too observe, what you're doing. It's really heartwarming to hear what an interesting experience has been for you as well. So it's a win-win-win. I was engaged in some of the challenges that you mentioned, some of the first weeks and months. Some of the folks that approached me on this issue were less than humanistic, if I could describe it that way, just arrest everybody. That's not the solution. Clearly, when it's the right time to take somebody through the process. But so I thank you for the work that you're doing. A couple of I guess questions. One is I'm wondering if you are interacting with groups that are in the business of providing supports to probably many of the folks that you're working with, so Outflow and a number of others. And I wonder if you aren't, if there's an opportunity there as well to make some connections. I know when initially we were having some of these challenges a couple of years ago, again, some of the suggestions coming back were not very humanistic, so I'm really pleased to hear. So the approach at the time, and I don't remember the officer at the time, but we did have a meeting with some of the social agencies to say, okay, folks, how can we do this in a humanistic way, right? So I'd leave that with you and the chief if there's some connections there with those groups. And then you made reference to maybe you made me think of a card or something that maybe you were handing out, or so.
Street survival booklet.
Yeah, street survival booklet is, and then just again, is there an opportunity? I don't know. I know I've been approached by a number of folks, especially as we get colder here. Is there a spot that we can find somewhere there that you've got a lock and a key, and it's got 20 backpacks in it with blankets and a little bit of this that we could, that you just go over and say, here's a backpack. So certainly, if that's something as well, and I don't get you out of your scope, but if that's something that would be interesting, certainly I know I've been approached by a number of service type organizations that would be interested in, but they just don't know where to put the backpacks. Like where do you put them? And yeah, so I guess, and then just for you to continue to think about with the chief and your management group. Just, I think you can provide us an awful lot of insight to those other social agencies on what you're seeing, and because ultimately what we want to do is you know, maybe you're dealing with 30 people or 50 or 100, and then it becomes 50, and then it becomes 20, like ideally, but that's not your scope to necessarily get that. But there's a lot of social agencies, there's a lot of money that comes into this city, so how do we use this intelligence that you're gathering, these friendships that you're building, and get to the other sort of root causes? So it's, you know, it's homelessness, it's a lack of employment or ability to work, it's all those other issues. Not asking you to solve those in any way, but it would be nice to use this knowledge that you're gaining, you know, to work with the other social agencies as well, to see if we can over time look after or help these folks, because they're, as you've quickly learned, they're human beings that
They are
struggling. Right?
They really are, and to get to know them, like I've taken the time to understand them and know who they are and where they've come from, rather than, hey, you've done something wrong, I'm going to charge you.
Right.
So it's that's been a good thing, and anyone we see that needs some type of help, we'll do our very best to either direct them or take them.
Good. And then just the last comment would be, there's another group working, the inspector's been involved in a bit, around some harm reduction initiatives. So that's another angle here around you know, addictions and opioid use and some of those challenges that likely you're interacting with some of those folks as well. So hopefully some other organizations and some other initiatives can bring some aid. So thank you, and thank you to the chief for doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
So just a few more things I just want to add to it. So if you look at return on investment from a business point of view, we have a return on investment by having Grant there. So there's a few questions that came up with regards to social interaction. We still have our crime reduction team, so Sergeant Hartley Brown and interactions that we have with community groups. So that's sort of taken care of in a different umbrella within the organization, and they share and they work together. We also have a community or crime reduction member in, you know, the south end area of the city, so there's that overlap.
Okay.
But the whole idea here is for the police force in this sense. In our uptown area, we have both commercial and residential. It's a very vibrant community, but it's also about the police force looking towards the city about economic development, retaining businesses, making the city, you know, the choice for folks such as Jeff to move into downtown to make that decision. That's our part. That's where the police force is involved in that part. Last Saturday I was up, or 2 Saturdays ago, I'm uptown, and I see a few things, and I say, geez, it'd be great if Grant was up here today. We cross the street, and there's Grant working. I just got, and he's engaged with somebody at Brunswick Square. Those are the things that are important. So let's just talk a little bit about Grant, just because it's important to recognize. So what Grant said today is what a lot of our officers do on a daily basis, day in and day out. Nobody asks them to go that extra step, allow them to. If there was a poster for the St. John Police Force does not turn their back on you, is in fact a picture, a viral picture that went through this summer of Grant after seeing somebody less fortunate uptown. Grant went out on his own and purchased a breakfast sandwich and a coffee or whatever that was. And Grant is giving that, and that picture shows Grant's back. So we don't turn our back on people, and some members like Grant that reflect the value of the St. John Police Force. So when we look at things about value for cost and those things at a micro level, that's Constable Lyons. That's the picture. That's what we try to do in this community. So as chief, I say to Grant, thank you for what you've done. He's done much more than I ever thought he would be able to do in a short period of time. Talks about some statistics and enforcement that he does, and that's important. But it's that working relationship that Grant has made with the community. I hear back. So I walked through the city market on Saturday, and I was stopped going up through the city market by different vendors. And at first it was, Chief, what's going on uptown? We see all these policemen out walking around uptown. It's Grant. And in fact, at Grant, there's an auxiliary member that comes out quite often with Grant.
That's right, I see.
And they go out and they walk together. But it's that new perception. We didn't see the police before, but now we're seeing them. And of course, people talk about that, so it's, oh, there's gonna be all kinds of things going on because there's a whole bunch of police uptown. It's Grant, and he's being seen everywhere. So that's the positive part of what we've done. The return on investment, I think you've heard what's there. The Uptown St. John, there's a great relationship there. They just did a survey, and they talk about the vibrancy of uptown. They talk about a little bit about the crime index, but some of that has to do with, because we have bars and, and unfortunately sometimes there's assault. But we work on that. But we also work at that micro level while he walks the beat and engaging folks, and we're gauging intelligence that helps us do other things in the police force. So very, very positive what Grant does. So I just didn't want him to leave here tonight with you hearing sort of the backside, because Grant won't say, because that's his character and that's his faith, that when he works uptown and tries to do his very, very best with people that he engages with, that's my job. That's in Grant's, that's just my job. But as a chief, I can tell you, it's above and beyond what he does. For the community, from when I get back, it's above and beyond what's there. Your worship, Jeff, have both mentioned, they see Grant uptown because they're up in that area, and perhaps Mike, you've seen them up in the area where you're at. That's the positive side of if I could afford to do this, I would have 10 grants all throughout the city, but unfortunately we can't. And we'll look at this program. We have it running. It's a pilot up until the end of 2019. And we'll see what our return on investment is. But so far, the return on investment's been very, very positive. So.
Excellent.
Thanks, Grant.
You have to walk sideways going with that door now. Don't let your head. It's all good.
That's a great presentation.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Okay.
And I'll make sure he doesn't drink on shift, though. I'm sure I don't need to make sure. He will know. Sorry for suggesting it.
I don't know if Sherry does, actually. Drink at all.
Okay, move on to, we don't have any committee reports. Number 8, consideration of issues separated from the consent agenda. Nothing there. So move on to 9, general correspondence. 9.1, internal monthly report.
For the month of September, there's no complaints. There's 1 complimentary correspondence and 0 grievances.
Any questions? Need a motion? Receive and file.
Seconded.
Okay, 9.2, overtime and court expenses, and court time expenses.
Mr. Chairman, if there's any questions, I would direct them to Mr. Korskadin.
Okay, does anybody have any questions on that? Has everybody looked at it?
Yeah, so I just have a question,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. I guess, Mr. Korskadin, so used to say Marvin. So just in terms of, I guess, you look at numbers on sort of like patrol services, $435,000 and so on. I guess, and not necessarily even for today, but to peel into, like, what's driving that, that number? I see in our overall overtime number, I think, the number's sort of up, and there's, we're struggling with the overtime. I know it's complex, you're going to say sort of resources and so on, but is there, if you were to peel that onion back, is there opportunity within that to tweak, to manage it differently? Just maybe some high-level comments, Marvin, rather than...
With respect to the overtime and patrol, which is really the driving factor, criminal investigations, it's related to investigations, it's ongoing, but in patrol, what we've experienced this year, Your Worship, is as of end of September, another report was speaks to it, is we backfill the 500 shifts, meaning that we were able to achieve our minimum mining numbers because of resource levels. And that's what's behind that number compared to the previous year to date. So I guess to answer your question is, we have a strategy going in 2019 with respect to getting that number down dramatically. And it really comes down to managing our resources differently than what we do today. And I would suggest to you that if I bring in September 2019 compared to this year, September 2018, you should see a quite significant reduction based on us not back on as much as we're doing this year.
Okay.
Great in the front.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions on 9.2? Motion to receive and file. So moved.
Second.
9.3, overtime hours, utilization report.
Recommendation to receive and file. Again, if there's any questions, Mr. Priscadden could answer those.
Anybody have any questions on that?
I think it just links to the same question in a previous report. I mean, I think when you've got a number of, I think as we go with some $700,000, I think it deserves to be drilled into and pulled apart and yeah, so thank you.
Okay, motion to receive and file.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, highlights of monthly activity report. Anybody have it?
Again, receive and file, Mr. Chairman. If there's any questions, I can answer those.
Sorry to keep like a hamster tonight. We've had conversations, I think, a number of times. Chief has made comments, I think, in some of his, put words in the chief's mouth, some of his public presentations, I think, including maybe at council last night around, core policing versus, non-core. And again, just encourage us to continue to drill into this onion as well, to say what are we doing? We're sort of in Lean or Six Sigma. They talk about sort of that, or do we have the surgeon doing the right work? And we've got our highly skilled and trained constables. Are they doing the right work? We used the example last night of bylaw enforcement. So just trying to understand. I'd love to hear in the future, I guess, Chief, with you and your management team, what opportunities exist to if you will, shed or do things a bit differently. And what does that mean? Can we jettison some work back to the province or back to a different department, or perhaps in the bylaw example, back to the city where we get a full-time bylaw crew that goes around chasing dogs and dealing with some of the nuisance type items. So thank you.
Okay, motion to receive and file.
Receive and file.
9.5, St. John Police Force, 2019 operating budget. Anybody have any questions?
Make a recommendation to receive and file. It's the report that was taken last evening to council. If there's any questions, we'll be pleased to answer them.
Motion to receive and file.
Yeah, so it's...
I'm sorry. Need a motion to send to finance? Get a motion to send the
Oh, it's right to it. Yeah.
St. John Police Force 2019 budget to the finance
That's
committee?
correct, sir.
Yep, I'll move that.
Second?
Second.
All right, any questions on that?
Just comment, great work to the team. I know it's not easy putting together a budget of that size with a very modest increase, so well done.
Okay, public safety, 9.6, Public Safety Communications Center, 2019 operating budget. Any?
I can make a recommendation that the, be received and sent on to the finance committee for after approval by the board.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Second, or motion moved, I don't know.